We will be talking about the parable of the prodigal son, which can be found in the Bible in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. This story centers around three main characters, a father and his two sons. So we have the father, the older son, and then the younger son. The parable starts with the younger son coming to his father and asking for his share of money and land. So basically, he's asking if he can receive his inheritance before his father dies. The father agrees and splits the money and land between his two sons. The older son stays back and works in the field while the younger son irresponsibly spends all of his inheritance. He travels and wastes all of his money on an extravagant lifestyle that doesn't suit him. He soon realizes that he has to return home and he has plans to beg his father to take him back as a servant. During this time, the older son has been at home tending the fields and working hard. When the younger son approaches his father, he is welcomed with open arms and starts to beg his father. But before he can even finish his practice speech, his father yells to the servants to grab the fattest calf and slaughter it as they were going to celebrate. The older son hears about his brother's return and becomes angry and resentful as to why he wasn't being celebrated for working so hard, and his brother was, even though he made mistakes. The father explains to the older son that his younger brother had basically been returned from the dead and he has been found again.
So this story, the parable of the prodigal son, is the third of three parables that are all about lost things that are found. It's targeted at a very specific audience, and that audience is the righteous, who are the lawmakers and the Pharisees, and the sinners, who are the criminals. And the righteous are likened to the older son out of the two, and the sinners are likened to the younger son. Um, the older son believes that the younger can't be turned away from their life of sin, and the sinners are always able to turn around their life and be welcomed back by God. And the purpose of telling this story is to explain to the lawmakers and the Pharisees that who really is the people who are lost, the people who are sinning, or the people who don't believe that people can come back.
In the story, the father runs to his son with open arms and doesn't even listen to his confession of his sins, his loss of the inheritance, and all that. He only forgives, and this is part of the essence of the parable. He clothes the son in a new robe, which is a symbol of regained dignity that also appears in Genesis with Adam and Eve. He also goes out to console the older son when he's dissatisfied with the celebration that the youngest brother got. This shows that the father, like God, is open to all that are lost in the path of salvation, be they self-righteous or repentant. That's why almost any representation of the parable you'll see shows the embrace of the father and the son as a symbol of a new relationship with God. The older son represents the self-righteous, the crowd of lawmakers in Jesus' audience that were against his forgiveness of sin. They claimed moral superiority over the tax collectors and the other sinners in the audience, though they didn't realize that their lack of forgiveness and compassion for these sinners, and the recognition of the blessings that they had already been given, was also straying from Jesus' path. As in 1 John chapter 3, verse 9, the older son's disdain for his brother after his return means he isn't really the upstanding guy he thinks he is. He doesn't realize that the father probably has given him more than his brother, with the estate mentioned in Luke chapter 15, verse 31. And he's too caught up in trying to be better than his brother that he doesn't appreciate his return in the first place. The youngest son, who his older brother so dislikes, is a symbol for all of us. As in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, everybody has sinned and falls short of the glory of God, which is why self-righteousness is so condemned in this parable. The important thing is that God is ready and waiting to forgive us, like the prodigal son, for our sins. As far as outside the Bible, the prodigal son parable appears in a lot of other material. One prominent modern example is The Prodigal Son. It's a crime drama TV series released in 2019, and in it, the son, who's the main character, he's a detective, and he returns to his father, who's actually in prison for murder. Now, in this case, the moral authority of the father and son are flipped, and the son is the upstanding citizen while the father is the sinner. I don't think this is meant to have any sort of separate intention as the original parable, but it's still interesting to see. Now, outside of Christianity itself, in Mahayana Buddhism, there is also a similar story in the Lotus Sutra. In it, the son comes back and does not recognize his father. He actually panics, fearing punishment after his father welcomes him back, the same as the son in the Bible. But the father helps him come closer and rewards him with higher positions instead of just salvation. The father in this story represents the Buddha, and the son represents any human being. I think it has a similar message to the parable in the Bible as well. Now, in art, Rembrandt actually made paintings depicting scenes from this parable, particularly the return of the prodigal son. As I touched on before, how the embrace is the big part of the moral of the story, in that God saves. Now, there's also the prodigal hero trope in a lot of modern media, in which a once disgraced character comes back to save the day. You can see this in a lot of video games. Star Wars: The Old Republic, for example. It's also in the newest Wolverine movie.